Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to bake up a fresh loaf of sourdough bread, and then we are going to make some beef and orecchiette pasta with a lovely kind of creamy beef sauce and mushrooms and snow peas. So let's start by flipping out our sourdough loaf. It's been proofing in the fridge now for this is on the last day. It's been about 3 days, which is typically the last day I can have it in the fridge before it gets overproofed. So we have it out. We're going to make our nice kind of score, our expansion score. I'm just going to widen it just a little bit. And let's see. Side. I think I'll do a nice kind of really thin one. And I kind of like the feather one the other day. So we're going to do that again. It's just a little cute, simple design. Lots of little lines. And we'll pop this in the oven. I have my oven preheated to 500 degrees so we can pop it in there for 20 minutes. And then we'll take the lid off and we'll bake it for 20 minutes at 450. Slide this guy in here. Always a little snug fit, but he always pops up nice. Okay, lid going on, and this is going to go in our oven that's nice and hot and toasty. This Dutch oven is nice and hot and toasty, and we're going to bake it at 500 for 20 minutes. Okay, set my timer, and then we're going to start prepping up our chuck roast so that we can pan-sear it off. We're going to season it with some herbs de Provence, rosemary, thyme, garlic salt, onion powder, just a nice kind of savory flavor that's going to work really well. I think with our veggies and just like using a chuck roast. So a chuck roast is great for a pot roast, but I also like to do it in things other just a pot roast or soup. When you're going to use it not in like a pot roast, you're going to want to trim off the big areas of fat because that is going to be like rubbery when you try to cook it up, because we're just going to be doing a pan sear on it to a nice medium rare so it's nice and tender. You don't want to overcook it when you're just doing a quick pan sear to keep it nice and tender. So I'm going to cut out that big fat vein when we get to it, but to start off, I'm going to just cut it into some nice kind of thinner strips to make it a little bit easier to cube up here in just a second. But chuck roast, chuck roast, I feel like goes through stages of tenderness. If you do your kind of nice saute on it and leave it at a nice medium rare, it's really tender. But then once you go and you cook it, if you're going to do like a longer cook, if you try to cook it beyond that, then it gets tough. But then if you do your longer stewing cook, it gets tender again to where it's like falls apart and off the bone and delicious, like in a pot roast. Okay. So now that I've got it all kind of cut up in basic things, I'm going to take out any bits of fat that I can see. Now, if it's a little bit of marbling, don't worry about it. It's just the really big chunks that you don't want to have.
You have a question? How was the gumbo at lunch?
Oh, it was delicious. It had like the perfect amount of heat. The flavors all came all the way through. And I just love a good Creole gumbo with that, the shrimp and the andouille sausage. I just think it's just really lovely. So it was wonderful. Jack actually, when he woke up from nap, he had a whole bowl of it because he saw me eating mine, and then he kept saying, "Oh, want a bite, want a bite." So I gave him a bowl and he ate it all. He loved it, which I thought he might be a bit too like spicy for him, but he loved it. Um, so that's a bonus for it. Normally I do my lunchtime ones are more for the adults and not the little ones, but it always surprises me what my little ones love. Some of the foods like Teddy and Jack have always been really big soup eaters. They just love soup. So it's nice
You have a question? Where do you get that cutting board?
So this cutting board is from IKEA on there, and it was like $5 at IKEA, which is such a steal. I totally love IKEA. We don't have one here in Nashville, but whenever I go to Memphis for soccer tournaments, I always go there because it's Swedish, so I have to visit it. And I always look at all the crazy stuff that I really, really want. But I'm not going to bring it back from Memphis. But I always go through the kitchen stuff because they have really good price kitchen. And like cutting boards, aprons, just little gadgets and stuff. I got a bunch of like cooking scissors there, but that's where I got it. And I love it because this is my meat cutting board. It has this nice thick rim that goes all around it, which allows if you have any like juices or whatnot, allows it to kind of seep in there so it doesn't spill over. Okay, these are pretty, take off the fat there. Now, for a pot roast, you keep your fat on because that's just going to cook and make it tender, and then you can use those drippings to make a wonderful gravy. But in this dish, it's fine with the small bits. You just don't want to leave the really big pieces, or because you're not giving them time to render down, they're going to be chewy. Here we go. So we've got them just about thing, and then we're going to season them up, kind of do nice little dry rub seasoning on them. And then we're going to saute them off in our pan. And then we're going to use our meat drippings to saute and make the base of our sauce, which is going to be, it's going to have lovely herbal notes, but I really want this kind of beef flavor to come through on it, which is why I think the chuck roast is so nice because it has a stronger beef flavor than, say, using a steak or whatnot. Okay, just about have these guys up, and we'll probably drop our noodles here. We will use just a little bit of our pasta water in reserve, like in our sauce. So before we dump it out, after we cook our pasta, we want to keep some because that's going to be a great way to thicken up your sauce and add a little bit more moisture to it without having to add as much like cream, and that starchiness helps just thicken it up. Because I'm not going to coat any of my beef here in flour or anything like that to make the base of the sauce. Okay, let's get these guys through. Just one more done. I always say prepping up meat, sometimes it feels like you're go on forever, but having a cleaver, which is this big honking knife, really makes trimming up meat really easy. I think it took me forever to actually invest in one because I was like, oh, I don't need one. But if you do a lot of meat prep, and if it meat prep, and I mean just cutting up meat, it does work wonders. It makes cleaner, faster cuts. Here we go. Just get this last bit out, and I'm going to wash my hands, and we be ready to season this meat up. Okay, before we get that popped in there, we're going to add in our pasta. So this is our orecchiette, which is almost like a shell type thing. It takes a little bit longer to cook up than a basic noodles. These take 14 to 15 minutes, but they are really nice and lovely ones. So we're going to put this whole pack in here. Teddy loves these noodles. He always calls them his little seashells. A lot of times I'll serve, when the kids were little, I would make these, but I would put peas in them, and the peas would hide up inside the noodle and they wouldn't see them as much. That trick doesn't work now as much. Okay, since got it on nice and high, since we are going to be using a little bit of this pasta water in ours, I'm just going to put a little bit of salt in here, just about a teaspoon or so. I am also going to mix some beef bouillon into my reserve stock water or starchy pasta water when I take it out, but I want it to, I still want to salt it a little bit. I'm going to turn this on a medium, and we're going to just start heating up some oil so that it will be nice and hot when we're ready to sear off our beef. I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons in here because this is a good sized pan. This is a 6-quart saute pan, and it has a pretty big base. So I just want to make sure that I have a nice thin coat all the way through. For our beef, we're going to season it up with some onion powder. This is going to give it a nice savory flavor, but it also helps make the meat a little bit more dried out without having to use like a flour on there. So it's that when I say dried out, it's going to allow it to kind of sear up a little bit nicer, not dry out and like moisture wise, but just gets a better sear. And then we're going to use herbes de Provence, which is what I like to call is like the French seasoning. You know how you have Italian seasoning? This is the French seasoning, and it's lovely. It has like a mixture of, thyme, marjoram, savory, just a lot of just like great herbs, but pretty like found in a lot of French cooking. So we're going to use about 1.5 teaspoons, a really nice dusting over all of this. I'm going to use my fresh herbs when I make my pasta sauce for those to come out, but for my meat, we're going to stick with the dry herbs. We're going to use about 1 teaspoon, remember 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, a good couple shakes over here. And last but definitely not least, we've got our garlic salt. And we're going to put in about 1.5 teaspoons of garlic salt. We do have about 2 pounds of meat here. It was about 2.5, but by the time you trim off all that fat, you're probably down some.
You have a question? What kind of pasta?
We're having orecchiette pasta. I'm sure I'm probably not saying it correctly. But they're like they're not shells, but they look kind of like shells. Okay, I'm going to toss our meat in the dry spices on there. I don't want, again, my meat to be too wet because I want it to get a really lovely crisp sear on it, because we're going to cook these nice and high, quick, fast searing to trap in that moisture. We're going to take them out when they're still kind of pink on the inside, like a reddish pink on the inside, so that they cook to be about a medium rare. So when we throw them back into our pasta at the end, they'll still be nice and tender. So these will cook up fairly fast. You don't want to overcook them, then they're going to be more tough. But now.
And what cut of meat?
This is a chuck roast that I trimmed the fat off, which I know is not always as popular in pastas. It's typically used in pot roasts and stews, but it is lovely seared off. I find my kids really like it. And it's nice. It's just a different way to cook it instead of like the slow, long, drawn out cooking.
Someone says that means ear in Italian. Do they look like little ears?
Yes, they do look like little ears. Oh, you know what? Yeah, that would, going on with the Latin word, they do look like little ears. You see, they'd be like little elf ears. You know what I mean? They look like little ears. Now I'm going to call them ear pasta from now on. I went to Target today and I totally bought dinosaur pasta and alphabet pasta for Teddy and Jack. So that might be made in a meal sometime soon. I told you I'm a sucker for crazy pasta, mainly because I just love pasta. I'm going to test my heat, but I think it should be nice and hot. Just going to put a little drip of water in. Beautiful. And now we're going to put our meat in here, but just don't crowd it. Let each one, again, have its space on the pan. I'm probably going to have to do this in 2 batches, but it is worth the wait, because if you overcrowd it and put too much in at a time, your pan's going to cool down the temperature, as well as it's going to seize the meat up where it leaks out all of its juices instead of keeping them inside. Here we go. So I'm just kind of right into one. There we go. So we'll definitely do it in 2 batches, mainly because I know if I try to put all of these in at one time, then they will not sear off. And so I'll just do half and half. Let's give our pasta a little bit of a stir here. Apparently there's supposed to be like some, I don't know if it's an old wives' tale, but if you leave a wooden spoon over the top, it's supposed to not boil over. I feel like I've done it once before and it still boils over. I still actually have a couple wooden spoons that my mom gave me like 2 decades ago.
The question: where do you get those pans?
So these pans, they're all clad, and I got them. Well, I got them almost like 17 years ago when I got married, but they still make them. I absolutely love these pans. Hence, they've made it 17 years through my not so gentle cooking, and they're going strong. I do have them in my Amazon storefront. I try to put all of my cookware and pieces, everything I use in the kitchen, in my storefront, and so many people are always asking about them. But I will say I highly recommend them. They are pretty awesome. I always call this is a 6-quart saute pan. I always call it my pasta pan because it has such a big lift that it's great for making pasta. Okay, we're gonna flip these over since we've got a nice sear going on. You can see where they've got this nice little brown crusty edges. That's from the onion powder. It's gonna give you that nice crust on it, and it's gonna have so much flavor in it. And the second side that we're going to sear these off, it's going to go much faster. The first side takes about a minute or two. The second side is much, much faster. Here we go. And again, when you pop these out, you want them to still be kind of reddish pink in the middle, because when they sit and continue to cook after being removed out of the heat, they're going to go to a nice medium rare. And then, of course, you'll pop them in your pasta at the end, which will add a little bit more heat. You just don't want to overcook them. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to grab a plate here so we can make our first kind of dump off here in just a second. You know, I like to just stir it around and get some of those crazy edges that I may have missed. Beautiful. But again, don't overcook these. Cook them to a little bit under because they are going to sit and continue to cook with their residual heat. And we will also be throwing them back in our pasta at the end. So just a smidge. For me, for our family, we like everything at a medium rare. So I cook it just a smidge under, knowing that it will continue to cook after I pull it off. So that's enough to really sear it off on both sides. And the little bites cook fast. And here we go. So we've got our first batch in. We're going to put our second batch. And they're going to be hot. So I'm going to warn the cameraman not to eat them. There we go. Slide this around. I'll get it there. Don't worry if you get little brown bits on the bottom of your pan. When we add our pasta liquid in there, we will deglaze them. They're not burning, they're caramelizing on there, which will add wonderful kind of meaty flavor into our pasta sauce. I feel like that's the one thing that people always get, hesitant about is you're cooking and you're like, oh, there's little flavors and bits. And I'm like, no, that is what you want. Those are going to be the caramelized meat drippings and spices that are going to add all the flavor and all the love to the pasta. Okay. Get it cooking right there. While we're waiting for those to cook up, let's get our onions sliced up and ready to saute. There we go. And I'm going to do a nice smaller dice on my onion because I don't We have more delicate noodles, our little ear pasta, our little orecchiette. So I don't want it to be too big of slices of onions. I think I actually might only use half an onion on here. I think a full one would be a bit much.
You have a question? How long does the pasta take?
The pasta takes about 14 to 15 minutes to get to that al dente. It is a thicker pasta. And just because it's little doesn't mean it's going to take less time. It is a thicker, like, thickness. Thicker thickness. That's using a very circular description there. But it does take a little bit more time for it to get to a nice al dente. And you don't want to, I like to take mine out right at al dente or a smidge before, because I do want it to soak up that pasta like liquid in like a pasta sauce. So I don't like to cook it right, to what it is, because then it can get a little bit more mushy. But it's a more hefty one. It's definitely a sturdier pasta. So we're flipping over our little tasty meat bits. Look at that nice, where that onion powder, you're getting this nice crispy sear on it, which is just going to have that wonderful flavor. And this is where, like, a lot of people will, like, dredge their meat in either flour or cornstarch to get kind of a similar effect, and then to use as a thickener. I like, for this dish, I like using the onion powder, because I don't want to add any flour as a thickener in my pasta. I'm not a big fan of flour to thicken pasta sauces. I like just either starchy water or doing like a reduction for it. Okay. I think these have only been in for about 10 minutes, but I will grab one out here and give it a check. Still needs a minute or two. Or 3. I forgot this little guy. Flip him back over. Okay. I hear my pasta or my thing going off, so I'm going to turn this down nice and low, and when we come back, that should be ready to take those little bits off here. And we're going to take the lid off of our sourdough. This is kind of my halfway point. So we cooked it for 20 minutes at 500. Now we're going to take off the lid, and then we'll cook it for 20 minutes with the lid off at 450. Here we've got our beautiful peak. You can kind of see the boning on our little feather design.
Everyone's saying you must have burned your mouth. And I'm like,
no,
part dragon.
I am part dragon. I swear. I drink my tea really hot. I take really hot showers. Everyone says I'm crazy. And I can like touch things that are very, very hot, and it doesn't bother me. Okay, 20 minutes, and I'm setting my oven to 450. Okay, got it. So now we're gonna just give our steak bites a quick toss, and then we'll be ready to kind of remove them out and get to the next part. There we go. I think a lot of mistakes that a lot of people will do is they overcook, because they're like, oh, I got to cook it to where you want it. You want to cook it to right before what you want it at, so that it remains tender. And because when you take it out, it's just like they always say, let your meat rest, let it sit, so it brings out those nice, juices, like gets locked in. But it also does continue to cook. So don't overcook it and think that it will be perfect, because if you cook it to where it's perfect in the pan, by the time you serve it, it will be over. Here we go. Okay. Dropping them out. Got to kind of build a tower here. Here are our delicious kind of chuck roast bites. One more on here. And now what we're going to do with our drippings in our meat, of our cooking our meat up in here, so all that delicious, wonderful flavor, we're going to add in our onion. So this is a half of a yellow onion that we diced up. There we go. I'm going to give this a nice kind of toss in here. When we get our liquid in here from the deglazing, that's what's going to pick up all of those bits. But don't worry, they're going to add great flavor. I think I'm going to add a smidge bit of butter in here for this. You could add oil, but I kind of like a butter when if a pasta just a little bit more. And when I say smidge, just about a teaspoon or so.
You have a question? Are your aprons in your Amazon store?
No, actually I probably could add some because I know that they sell them, but these are Headley and Bennett. I did the mystery box, and I really lucked out. Although this was one I picked out before, but I find that they're expensive, but they are really good quality. But the mystery box, if you don't mind what you're gonna get, you can get them for like 50% off each one. So you can get 3 for essentially the price of 1 apron. So I'm always a sucker for a sale and a deal. And I've done the mystery box twice, and I haven't gotten any repeat ones. Now, the first time I did the mystery box, I got all Star Wars. I got like a Darth Vader, a Luke Skywalker, and a gosh, I'm blanking on her name. What is it? Help me with it.
I was reading down what you said.
My aprons. I got a Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and I can't remember the other one. Ahsoka. I knew it was an O. I knew it was an O, guys. But those are things. I love Star Wars. Star Wars were re-released when I was a kid. So in like the late 90s. And I collected the cards. I was kind of a little bit of a nerd. I loved them. Went to all their movies in theaters then. And then, of course, I saw the new episodes 1, 2, and 3. And then everything. I've seen all the Star Wars ones. So I absolutely love them. So I was happy with that. The second time I got my mystery box, I got some really great, just basic ones. I got a blue one, a gray one, and and then I got this nice, the Waxman style, which was denim and yellow. So I got 3 really great ones. Okay, I'm going to turn this up just a smidge. And now our pasta, I'm fairly certain, is ready now. But again, I will try and give it a taste. Yeah, they're right out of done. They could cook a minute longer, but I think they're good. I told you, heat does not bother me. We're going to grab a little bit of this pasta broth out because we want to use this in our sauce. Here we go. So I'm looking for about up to a cup. I'm trying not to get a noodle in here. That's okay if I do. But we're going to use this starchy water to thicken up our sauce along with some cream. I am going to put a little beef bouillon in it because I do want it to be a nice beefy flavor to our sauce. Here we go. Okay, that should be more than enough of our starchy water. And you can see how cloudy it is. That is just the pasta starch from it. I'm going to have to move the meat bits away from the cameraman if he's going to continue eating them before dinner. I swear. Always when I'm cooking, I have little hands going everywhere, stealing food. Okay, we're going to drain up our pasta. There we go. We've got our orecchiette right there. You can see they're a very thick noodle, so they take longer, but they still have a wonderful bit of firmness to them. So right before an al dente on them, so that they soak up more of that to get to the perfect softness to it. And if you're not sure what an al dente means, it's when you bite through it, it's soft, but still has that little firmness at the end. Okay, let's get our garlic in here. I've got about a tablespoon of minced up garlic. We're going to add this. I'll mix it in. We'll let this saute for just about a minute. You got to always keep an eye on your garlic. Garlic loves to go from being beautiful to burnt in no time. So keep your heat around a medium and just don't leave it too long unattended. Let's grab our mushrooms. We're going to slice up our mushrooms and start sauteing them. Here we go. And so I'm just going to use some baby bellas. You could use white button mushrooms. I wouldn't waste a fancy mushroom on this dish because there's so many more like overpowering flavors that it wouldn't do it justice. Here we go. And I find that the mushrooms with the orecchiette they work well because they're kind of like the same shape. So we'll get these nice and chopped up. Now you can always buy pre-sliced ones. I like to slice my own because I find pre-sliced ones get slimy pretty quickly. And so slicing your own likes them to stay nice and like dry and spongy so that they soak up all those wonderful flavors. And I do mine slightly thinner than the pre-sliced ones because I like them to have more of that saute flavor on them. So we're going to mix this all around. And always just as you're stirring, scrape at that bottom, bring up those tasty bits. Again, when we deglaze the pan, when we add in our starchy water, we will get more of that deliciousness off. Okay. Let's get those up. Let me grab a spoon. We're going to mix some beef bouillon into our starchy water so that we can have more of a beef flavor in this pasta. And I think that just works well with the chuck roast and having it on here. So we're going to do like a teaspoon and a half of beef bouillon. And I really like using the beef bouillon over you adding broth because if you do broth, you can't use your starchy water. And the starchy water is going to really make this pasta sauce thick, a nice velvety texture. Okay, we have that mixed up and ready. We've got our fresh garlic in there, and I have a little bit of fresh herbs that we're going to throw in as well that kind of complement the beef. So I'm going to take a couple leaves of rosemary. Rosemary is a pretty strong spice. So when this is minced up, it will be like a half a teaspoon of fresh one, but its flavor is really strong, and I just don't want it to be too overpowering in the dish, but I like the subtle notes. And then we have some fresh thyme, which is never fun to de-leaf, but we want to just get the leaves off the sprigs as much as possible. Now, luckily with thyme, if you leave a little bit of a sprig, that's fine. It's a more tender one. It's not like rosemary where you have an actual branch. And the sprigs have a little bit of flavor to it. But thyme is one of the harder herbs to, kind of take care of. Oregano always comes off very easily.
You have a question. What did you add to the pasta water?
So I added about a tablespoon and a half of beef bouillon. So it's going to give it a nice beefy flavor, which will just complement. We've got the beef drippings in here with our pasta as well as our chuck steak that we've sauteed off. Here we go. Beautiful. Now I'm going to take these herbs. Again, we've got our rosemary and our thyme, and I'm going to mince it up nice and fine because I want them to be small and spread throughout our pasta.
Do you have a question? What's the difference between white and button mushrooms?
So white button mushrooms, they're two different types of like mushrooms fungus. So baby bellas are, like the small version of a portobello, more, I actually think they taste better than the big versions. Big versions are a bit more dry. Baby bellas have a slightly earthier flavor to them, while white button mushrooms are paler and then just more mild in flavor. But their texture when you saute them up are also very, very similar with the baby bellas and the white button. It used to be that baby bellas were more expensive, but now they're about the same, like price-wise. Okay, here is our lovely minced up herbs. We've probably got about a teaspoon and a half of them. Half of that being rosemary, or half a teaspoon of rosemary and about a teaspoon of thyme. Just want to make sure I get all of that lovely herbs. And we've got some snow peas, which are lovely, that we're going to throw in here and saute in here as well before we add in our sauce. Now, you don't need to blanch these because we are going to be making a liquid-based sauce, and that will kind of continue to cook them. But when I make like my lo mein and I throw in a snow peas, I blanch them first because there's not as much of a liquid-based sauce for that. These are already washed and trimmed, and you don't have to do much for them. Just throw them in. And we're going to give them a good minute or two with that direct heat before we start adding in our liquids so that they can really kind of turn a nice vibrant green color. When you first put them in, you'll notice that the snap peas have like a whitish green, so they've got some paleness. Once they turn a really nice vibrant green, that's when they're going to be tender, like the tender crisp. Well, there'll still be a nice firmness to them, but they'll be tender enough to eat through. And I will say that they're a great addition. I feel like they get used in a lot of Asian pastas or like lo mein or Asian dishes, but not so much in other types of pasta dishes. But they're great. They're delicious on there, and they'll pick up the flavor well. I feel like I would do peas, but my kids or my husband doesn't like peas, and half my kids don't. So these are kind of get you to a pea. Okay, those are looking pretty darn good. You can already see we've got some really bright, vibrant green, like here, this one, and how soft and tender it is already. So it doesn't take long for it to really heat up. Before we add in, we are going to put in a little bit of tomato paste. This is going to add the perfect amount of acidity. Let me check. I don't think my timer, oh, it did. Normally my timer's up high. It didn't. I was like, wait a second, my timer's off. I still have 6 minutes. But it's just, I set the timer first, so it went to the top. We're going to add a little bit of tomato paste. This is going to add the perfect amount of acidity to this pasta, which is going to just kind of work really well. Not super a lot of amount. I'm just using about a half a tablespoon. But it's something that balances out the beef in this dish, which, just makes it really, really lovely. We're just going to mix it in, and you're just going to heat it up for just a second. You don't need to cook it too long, but just spread it around until it's coated all of the vegetables.
Just had a question. What are you calling this dish?
I'm created it up on my own right now. It just sounds really delicious. So I got to make a name. Maybe if anyone has suggestions, you guys can come up with it. But I am thinking like a beef. I don't know. I'm thinking on it. I like to just create dishes all the time. That's my favorite part about cooking, is just blending things that I know are going to work together to make a lovely kind of dish. So I'm going to say like a mushroom, beef and mushroom. See, nothing clever is jumping out at me. I really wanted something clever. But it will be delicious. That's all that matters. Okay, we've added in our first little bit of our sauce. And as you can see, almost all of those little tasty bits on the bottom of our pan are gone. So those are incorporated into the sauce, which is just going to make them lovely. Add a little bit more. And I like to do it nice and slow. I don't just dump it all in at one time, so that it really helps the sauce come together. We're not flooding it. Beautiful. Now we got the rest of that in there. So that was about around a cup of our reserved starchy water with our beef bouillon. And this should be a little bit more flavorful than you want, but we are going to be adding in some cream to balance it out. It is really delicious. Now I'm deciding, do I want cream in it? I think I still do. But really good. How is it?
Pasta stroganoff.
Ooh, it's kind of, though, stroganoff though is kind of, you've got some mustard and a a Dijon base to it. So I don't, I'll have to think about it. We're going to start with about a 1/3 cup of cream and mix it in here. Although now it's kind of getting that stroganoff look to it. But it's not going to quite have that tanginess to it. Okay. Perfect. So I'm going to bring this up. And then before we add our noodles in, we will add our beef right back in here. And make sure when you add it in, add it with any of those juices that have released out, because those will add more of that beefy flavor to our pasta.
Yeah, creamy beef and noodles.
I know, it is kind of like a creamy beef and noodles. See, it's just so delicious. Get this a nice little coating up. And when we add our pasta in here, that is going to help soak up this liquid, as you can see, but there's not very much in there. It's already thick, but that is why you want to cook your pasta to right under or right at an al dente or before, because it leaves it room for it to soak up all of this deliciousness. Now, when your pasta comes out, it's going to come out stuck together. Don't worry about it. That is going to break apart once we start adding that liquid to it. You just don't want to cover it with butter or oil, because that's going to prevent it from soaking up these flavors. So just nice and easy, cover it in there and break it apart.
Is there a request to go over the sauce?
So our sauce, we started out by sauteing off our chuck roast. Then we cooked up onions, garlic, and the little leftover drippings. We added in fresh thyme and rosemary. We used starchy water mixed with beef bouillon in here. And I think we also have garlic. So it's just a nice beefy, a little bit of tomato paste to give it a nice little bit of acidity there to kind of cut through the richness. Beautiful. And you can see how almost all of our pasta sauce has sucked up into these noodles here. Wonderful.
I don't know what this is, but a beef primavera.
Not quite a primavera either. Primavera has some other veggies in it, more fresh on there, and a little tomato base to it. There's a little there. Ah, mystery pasta. Sophisticated hamburger helper. Because you've got your beef in here, but it's not ground beef. You got your noodles, but they're not macaroni. Beautiful. Okay, we're going to turn this off, guys, because it is done, and we're going to let it sit here. But before we step away, we're going to sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan cheese on it so that can steam up in there. Delicious. Oh, and look, our thing is calling us. Perfect timing. So I just like to sprinkle a nice little bit over the top. I'm not going to mix it in because I don't want it, again, to stick to the bottom of our pan, but it will melt over and it will be delicious. Okay. Let's go grab our sourdough out of the oven. I'm going to slide it off because it doesn't need any more heat. So we cooked it for the last 20 minutes at 450. Let me grab this. Beautiful. And it has our nice peak on it, a nice golden brown. The trick is you don't want to leave it in our Dutch oven for too long, because this Dutch oven stays nice and hot. And we have a perfect kind of golden crust to it now, but that crust will cook and get darker and darker. So see, we've got this nice perfect browning. We've got our peak. We've got our feather design. Let's lay it right on here. This is our gorgeous traditional sourdough loaf. Now, with sourdoughs, you do have to wait about 10 minutes before you cut into it. Otherwise, it is doughy. After 10 minutes, gives it time for it to steam out, which allows it to be nice and have all those nice little crumbly, bubbly holes in it without it being gummy. Let's get dinner served up. On two, we'll do this in a bowl today because that just works. Actually using a pasta bowl for pasta. And we will also add a bit more Parmesan cheese at the end. Even better, let me grab my fresh so we can grate it, because freshly grated Parmesan is the best. I will say, if you've never had fresh over like even just the pre-shredded, fresh is much more soft and tender, while the pre-shredded has dried out some and is not as nice. Actually feels like it has more of a mild flavor fresh, and it's more of a stronger flavor when it's dried. Okay, well, let's serve this up. And of course, gotta have my shovel. For dinner tonight, we have our pan-seared chuck roast bites with orecchiette pasta, mushrooms, and snow peas, and a beefy cream sauce that is filled with rosemary and thyme. We season the meats with herbe de Provence. We add a couple more orecchiette noodles in here. Beautiful. And we also added a little bit of tomato paste to add up some nice little, acidity to it to round out the flavor, and then a bit of cream to just give it that lush velvety texture. And then we're going to finish it off with our Parmesan cheese. And of course, we will have a slice of our sourdough bread, which will be delicious for dipping in that sauce as well.
All right, last chance to name it.
Last chance to name it. Let's see. Oh, beef and mushroom orecchiette pasta. That was so lame. That's so lame.
You'll have to read the comments and choose.
Okay, I'll have to. I will decide, and then we will name it that way. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, I try to upload all of my videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes, like our mystery dish, you can definitely go there, search for our mystery dish, and watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my pots, my pans, my knives, my cutting boards, all the different gadgets that I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.